How much do you know about the science of personality? Now, we're not going to approach this from the perspective of BuzzFeed, horoscopes, or any fundamental attribution errors. We're going to fact check this field with our best mate's psychology. So question 1. During a conversation with a friend, Al starts to get angry. This is an emotion that he considers childish. So as a result, instead of noticing his own anger, he unknowingly starts to believe that his friend is becoming angry and excited, even though she's doing no such thing. So this example best demonstrates the defense mechanism of 1, 2, or 3. It is 2, projection. So let's have a look at these. So defense mechanisms. In psychoanalytic theory, a defense mechanism is an unconscious psychological operation that functions to protect a person from anxiety-producing thoughts and feelings related to internal conflicts and outer stresses. So reaction formation. In psychoanalytic theory, reaction formation, German, that is risky. Reaction, nope, not going to say it. Well, that's what it means in German, is a defense mechanism in which emotions and impulses which are anxiety-producing or perceived to be unacceptable are mastered by exaggeration of the directly opposed tendency. The reaction formations belong to level 3 of neurotic defense mechanisms, which also include dissociation, displacement, intellectualization, and repression. For example, hating someone you have a crush on. If you ever just like someone so much you hate them, that's reaction formation. Projection. So psychological projection is the process of misinterpreting what is inside as coming from outside. In its malignant forms, it is a defense mechanism in which the ego defends itself against disowned and highly negative parts of the self by denying their existence in themselves and attributing to others, breeding misunderstanding and causing untold interpersonal damage. So a bully may project their own feelings of vulnerability onto the target, or a person who is confused may project feelings of confusion and inadequacy onto other people. Projection incorporates blame shifting and can manifest as shame dumping. Projection has been described as an early phase of introjection. So sublimation. In psychology, sublimation is a mature type of defense mechanism in which socially unacceptable impulses or idealizations are transformed into socially acceptable actions or behaviors, possibly resulting in a long-term conversion of the internal impulse. And displacement. So this is when you have experienced an ego. That doesn't make sense. So displacement involves taking out our frustrations, feelings, and impulses on people or objects that are less threatening. Displaced aggression is a common example of this defense mechanism. So, as you can see, question 1, Al doesn't become really happy once he realizes his anger, so it's not reaction formation. Al doesn't channel his anger into socially acceptable behaviors, so it's not sublimation. And he doesn't yell at his friend or abuse her, so it's not D. Seems to think that his anger is coming from the outside, so the answer is B. He's projecting. Question 2. Carl Rogers believed that something can produce serious negative consequences for people by creating something between self-perception and experience and a need to distort important experiences. Have a read through, pause the video, because I have a life to live, and I'm not reading everything when it's on the screen in this situation. Okay, so the point is C. Conditions of worth incongruence. So Carl Rogers believes that these conditions of worth can produce serious negative consequences. Yeah, I am still reading off the screen, you know what I mean? There's more interesting things to talk about, to read. So if you place yourself on a pedestal, you won't choose to identify and solve inconsistencies within yourself when they come up. If you accidentally run a duck, I made this one up, obviously. So if you accidentally run a duck over while speeding, you'll blame the duck and not your speeding, leading you to continue speeding. So if you produce your conditions of worth, if you put yourself on a pedestal, this will cause incongruence between self-perceptions. So running ducks over and you're just going to think of a stupid duck, but no, you need to stop speeding. So yes, good old Carl Rogers. Question 3. A psychoanalytic theorist who wants to criticize humanistic theories of personality but does not want to be critical of his own perspective would probably point out which of the following. The answer is 1. Humanistic theories rely too heavily on people's conscious reports of their experiences. Question 4. Which of the following would not be considered a limitation that confronts the trade approach to personality? Answer is B. Needs to be less reliance on factor analysis to determine traits because of the severe limitations of the statistical tool. Question 5. Which of the following approaches to personality is best able to resolve the apparent contradiction between the assumption that people's personalities are stable and research results indicating that people's behaviors are not particularly consistent over time or across situations? So, the answer is the social cognitive perspective. So what gives this away is that people's behaviors are not particularly consistent. So this is cognitive way. This is relating to a cognitive perspective. People's behavior is not particularly consistent because we have a brain in our heads that constantly thinks new things, new information, and situations. Social. It's really social. All right, question 6. Dr. Stevens studies social behavior among children, and he creates an elaborate coding system to classify various social behaviors that children display, such as sharing their crayons. Dr. Stevenson's work is best considered as an example of which type of personality assessment? Yeah, it sounds like behavioral assessment to me, and it is. Question 7. A person who is intellectual, imaginative, and has a broad range of interests would most likely score highly on a measure. This is referring to the Big Five. So they would score highly on openness because they're open to anything. They've got a broad range of interests, they're intellectual, they're imaginative, so they're quite open. Question 8. Andrew, I feel like I just ignored the rest. So agreeableness would just, going along with anything that happens. It's not really openness. There's a difference there. Extroversion, just getting along with lots of people. This has nothing to do with being social conscientiousness. This has nothing to do with planning. This is just him accepting and being open and exploring things. Question 8. Andrew likes to be efficient with his homework. He has designed a timetable that shows what courses he would like to complete on certain days of the week, so he can maximize his time for each course in order to achieve good grades. With regards to the Big Five, we could assume that Andrew is high in what factor? No, I don't know why I don't even think neuroticism is one of them, but the answer is conscientiousness. The Big Five personality dimensions: extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, emotional stability, and openness to experience. So, extroversion, high, outgoing, energetic, gregarious, quiet, withdrawn, and unassertive. Agreeableness, warm, considerate, good-natured, aloof, easily irritated, impulsive. These are all part of the Big Five personality dimensions. Question 9. Bob thinks that he is a good tennis player, and his I just blended like 3 words in one, and his results support this belief. He wins most of his tennis matches. This agreement between Bob's beliefs and his actual experience would best be considered as an example of Carl Rogers's concept of congruence. So what is congruence? According to Rogers, when there is a good fit between all 3 components, the person has congruence. So these are the 3 components: self-image, self-worth, and ideal self. This is a healthy state of being and helps people to continue to progress towards self-actualization. Question 10. Josh believes that he is socially outgoing. He just met several new people, some of whom have told him that he seems to be a very social person, but others have told Josh that he seems to be quite shy and reserved. According to the construct of self-verification, which of the following would we expect in the future? So Josh remembered the congruent feedback better than the incongruent feedback because he will only accept what aligns with his beliefs, the congruencies. Question 11. Jan bases most of her behaviors on her beliefs and attitudes, but Greg varies his behavior depending on the situation. Jan's behavior would probably be what? Stable, so more or less stable than Greg's across time, and the difference between Jan and Greg best illustrates the concept of self-efficacy, striving for superiority, self-verification, or self-monitoring. The answer is more and self-monitoring. So, self-monitoring is the ability to regulate behavior to accommodate social situations. In a nutshell, in more detail, self-monitoring is a concept introduced in the 1970s by Mark Snyder, and this describes the extent to which people monitor their self-presentations, expressive behavior, and non-verbal affective displays. Self-monitoring is defined as a personality trait that refers to the ability to regulate behavior to accommodate social situations. So people who are concerned with their expressive self-presentation tend to closely monitor their audience in order to ensure appropriate or decide public appearances. Self-monitors try to understand how individuals and groups will perceive their actions. Some personality types commonly act spontaneously, low self-monitors, and others are more apt to purposely control and consciously adjust the behavior, high self-monitors. So that pretty much explains it. So as you can see here, Jan is quiet. She monitors herself all the time, and Greg, he's just whatever happens, whatever goes on. So his self-monitoring is quite low. He doesn't know what his beliefs and attitudes are. Question 12. Ralph is a rather passive person. Although he is content with himself, he doesn't believe that his actions make much of a difference in the world. For instance, he assumes that most governments are run by a few powerful people, and there's very little he can do to change these things. Ralph would most accurately be described as having, and the answer is, an external locus of control. So locus of control. The locus of control is the degree to which people believe that they, as opposed to external forces beyond their influence, have control over the outcome of events in their lives. The concept was developed by Julian B. Rott in 1954 and has since become an aspect of personality psychology. So a person's locus, plural loci, Latin for place or location, is conceptualized as internal, a belief that one can control one's own life, or external, a belief that life is controlled by outside factors which the person cannot influence, or that chance or fate control their lives. Individuals with a strong internal locus of control believe events in their life are primarily a result of their own actions. For example, when receiving exam results, people with an internal locus of control tend to praise or blame themselves and their abilities, and people with a strong external locus of control tend to praise or blame external factors such as the teacher or exam. So Ralph here has an external locus of control. Question 13. A culture has very strict social norms about appropriate behaviour for children, and both adults and peers usually punish any child who deviates from these norms. Psychologists familiar with the cultural dimension of personality would most likely describe this culture as scoring high on tightness. There is a lot of restriction going on here. Question 14. A major drawback of projective tests such as the Rorschach is that what? Well, if you're not familiar with the Rorschach, you look at blobs, and then depending on what you see in the blobs, the psychologist tells you about your state of mind. So as you can imagine, different examiners may interpret the same response differently. So in psychology, a projective test is a personality test designed to let a person respond to ambiguous stimuli, presumably revealing hidden emotions and internal conflicts projected by the person into the test. For example, here you might see flowers, and this could indicate that you're happy, but someone who grew up hating flowers might think that you're suffering internal conflict. Like, it really depends. Question 15. A personality researcher who proposes traits on the basis of words or concepts from everyday language has what sort of approach? This would be a lexical approach. Question 16. The primary reason that personality researchers are often very interested in studying identical and fraternal twins read together versus read apart is because it allows one to separate the variation in personality into genetic and environmental components. And that's it. It's actually quite interesting. If you, and have a bit of spare time, look into identical twins and fraternal twins. It's very fascinating, especially when you're studying disorders. It can help answer quite a few questions as to what extent genetic and environmental components have on a specific disorder or any other health issues. All right, that concludes the personality quiz. I hope you learned something new, and hopefully you can apply some tricks to your own life. Thanks for watching.